Uvlami Atitu Atira Reneltta Arluk. So good day. Hello, my name is Reneltta Arluk, and I'm the Director of Indigenous Arts here at Banff Centre for Arts and Creativity. I'm here in Treaty 7 territory, home of the Stoney Nakoda, Blackfoot Confederacy, Métis Region 3, and Gathering Nations of Cree and Tanaha and Inuk. I'm just really grateful to be able to be here today, and joining us is Christi Belcourt, who's an incredible visual artist and advocate. Christi is a visual artist, designer, community organizer, environmentalist, social justice advocate, and avid land-based arts and language learner. Christi's a visual artist with a deep respect for traditions and knowledge of her people. Like generations of Indigenous artists before her, she celebrates the beauty of natural world while exploring nature's symbolic properties. Her paintings are found within many public and permanent collections across North America. She has also organized several large national community-based projects of note, including Walking with Our Sisters, the Willisville Mountain Project, Nimkia Ajibigong, and various works done with Onaman Collective. Christi donates the proceeds from her collaborations and awards to Nimkia Ajibigong, the year-round Indigenous language and traditional arts camp that she, along with a small group of people, started in 2017. The camp is committed to the revitalization of Anishinaabemowin language, along with providing opportunities for elders and youth to come together in a land-based learning environment. So decolonizing the narrative sessions, we've been hosting them throughout the year, and it's inviting artists that are leading in their arts discipline through an Indigenous-centered lens. And so I'm just really grateful to end this series with the incomparable Christi Belcourt. Welcome, Christi.
Well, hello there, and thank you for having me.
It's wonderful to have you. And I'll just let you jump right in. And I really look forward to our conversation tomorrow, but also listening to everything that you have to share today. Masichokuyanik.
Okay, thanks. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for joining in to listen to me talk about my art. It's, it's a kind of a rare thing that you would think that I would talk about my art or want to talk about my art often, but I don't. I actually don't enjoy talking about my art that much. Mostly I like to talk about the things that propel the art, or the meaning, the thing that inspires me. Sometimes it's not always art that inspires art, right? Or often with me, it's not. So but I feel like it because I've been in my studio, see these two pink frogs behind me, or I guess three. I just finished the two pink frogs last night, and the night before I finished that one. And I'm sort of in this real pink mood. And, I haven't really put it out there online about these, but people are ignoring what's going on with the climate crisis. And, frogs are like canaries in the coal mine, and they are an incredible keystone species that supports life on the planet and supports our life. And people ignore things that are from nature, and but you can't really ignore pink frogs. So this is starting as sort of I'm going to enter into a pink era, I think. I'm just kind of feeling these colors here, and I'm enjoying them. So I'm going to be doing some more pink paintings, and I'm not sure what yet, but yeah, that's going to be it. But I've prepared like this PowerPoint because I find it easier. Rather than just, looking at me, bobble my head around talking about art. It's better if we, jump into looking at some art. And in this case, it'll be my art, which is, like I said, on the rare occasion, do I even like to talk about it. But so here we go. I'm gonna share my screen, and I'm gonna get into it for quite a while. And then at the end, if there's time left over, then I'll pop back out. Maybe we'll have time to, talk back and forth, or have a few questions or something like that. But tomorrow night will be more of a discussion anyway. So again, thank you very much for listening to me and for joining in. So I'm going to share my screen now, and here we are. So first of all, I always want to place myself and say where I come from, where my people come from, which is Manitou Sakahigan, which is what means increase, spirit lake. But it was renamed in 1844 to Lac Saint Anne, and that is the name that people use now. I mostly just use the original place names. I did a series once on original place names that was really important to me. And I think reclaiming our original place names is really important because these places had names for thousands of years before being named into, European-based languages. And we need to restore these names back because they're the rightful names of place in this country. My family, my dad, that's my dad on the right there, and my grandma on the left. My grandma, my Nokum, was a Larondel. She married into the Belcourt family. And my dad, Tony, is the eldest of 5 siblings. And only 3 are remaining now, and so we've lost two of my aunties, and my grandparents are no longer alive either. They're in the spirit world. So my grandfather's name was Emil Belcourt. My great grandmother's name was Taranjo. She was the one who who raised my grandma, and my other great grandmother's name was Laroque on my grandpa's side, and so there was a lot of people, Métis people, marrying Métis people. So Latender and Taranjo, Moussois, Laroque, Larondels, Belcourts, and a whole bunch of other names. Those are all my family names of the people that I come from the area of Lac Saint Anne. My grandparents were both Cree speakers. That was their first language. And they later on learned English. My dad was raised speaking Cree for the first few years of his life until he went to school. And then after that, when he was sent to school, my grandparents made the decision to not speak the language in the house anymore because he was struggling so much in school. And that's a common story of what's happened to our languages across the country, is how our languages have been in severe decline. And it's a symptom of genocide. It's a symptom of colonialism. So part of, as the introduction was stating, part of it is that I am an avid language learner. I'll get into that a little bit more later. This is my great grandma, Sarah Taranjo, and that's my grandma. That was her at around the age of 17, and that was the house that they lived in Lac Saint Anne. And the house has since been torn down, but I did get to see a little piece of it. It was built onto, so it didn't look like that when I saw it, but that was the house that they lived in, and that was typical of Métis houses. 2 of the people that I wanted to mention who are my mentors, and one is the late Wilfred Pelche Bun, and Maria Campbell, who many of you probably know. These 2 elders have had the most impact in my life than anyone else, I would say, in terms of teachings and reconnection. I think that that's a really important thing in my life that's happened, is that I've was raised, in the city, submersed in Métis politics, because my dad was, a Métis rights leader for 45 years or so. And so me growing up in Ottawa, we were away from family. We were, I was the only Native kid in my class for sure. And so reconnecting was really important, and these two elders really took me under their wing at a young age and started to provide me with teachings and put me out to fast, and all of these things that people need for their soul, I suppose, or I need for my soul. That's what they did. And I just want to acknowledge them, because there's a lot of the things that I share that come from them. I need to just move my little people screen over a minute. This is a piece called I Dress Myself in Stories, and it's acrylic on canvas with bone, metal little jingles, and some buttons out of Maria Campbell's button box. So she has this button box that has the most interesting buttons in it, and she often uses it as a catalyst for storytelling and circles and talking groups and things like that. And she'll bring out this button box, and you take a button, and then you tell, you speak about what does it mean to you, what does it remind you of, and those kinds of things. So I took some. She invited me to take some buttons, and I took some, and then they made it in the second column there. And so there's this beautiful quote by the late elder Dan Pine. We've been undressing for too long. It's time to put our clothes back on. It's time to go back home. Take the water that flows in the lakes and bring them back here within your spirit. Take the fish in the water, the insects, the animals, the birds that fly, and those that do not, and bring those too back within you. The trees, the rocks, the land, the sky, the clouds, the winds, the air, the stars, and bring those back too within you where they rightfully belong. Take the spoken word in every language take the spoken word in every language there is on this earth. This too belongs within you. Then and only then will you be home, and will you be fully dressed. And when the knock on the door comes to you, and when the knock comes to your door, you will be there to open it. Each foot will know exactly where to fall, and then you cannot make a mistake. And Wilfred used to talk about Dan Pine a lot. And so there was like a lot of time that I spent with Wilfred. A lot of us young people spent with him, and he would talk about these things, these philosophies, these ideas of connection and interconnectedness of everything that there is on the earth. And so there's the belief of our first family. And this is where we are, as the human species, supported by plant species. Plant species are, they support everything on this earth. They provide 50% of the oxygen on the earth. Oceans provide the other 50%, but it's the plants in the oceans that provide that other 50%. And it's, plants are foundational to life on earth. They are alive, they contain spirit. People can communicate with the plants. There are medicines, there are food, and they're the food and medicines for everything else on earth. They hold the soil together. They provide like everything that we need in this world, including the rains. They control the winds, the air. And so as part of my sort of coming of age, I suppose, I started to really pay attention to plants. I started to ask them and go ask them, how do you grow, and really get into it. And it was through this and then the study of beadwork that I started to really get interested in starting to try to paint beadwork for the first time. My first attempts were not very successful, but you get better as you go. And so I started to take photos and just go out on the land. My partner at the time, the father of my daughter, we moved to north of Manitoulin Island and moved up on a mountain across from the Willisville Mountain, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But this on the La Cloche mountain range. And what I did was I spent a lot of time just with my nose to the ground, or my nose to the plants, I suppose. And what I started to notice was that what Wilfred was talking about was so true when he talked about the interconnectedness of all things. Every single plant seemed to have little insects on it and little tiny hairs. And then I could see why, for example, in beadwork, you can see those little white, they call them mouse tracks, those little white hairs that beadworkers would do, or the really bizarre kind of patterns. They start to look strange when you start to look at them up close and in depth, but you really understand just how important they are to our life and to all life on Earth. And they're so delicate and beautiful. And, you know, I really do just see plants as equals to us. And this is something that drives me in my art all the time, is I'm trying to convey the beauty of plants and the beauty of us and the beauty of this earth. And I feel like when we understand this, when we see how beautiful things are, and we are in constant awe and gratitude to every living species on Earth, that's when we start to want to stand up and protect it, and protect not only our lands for our quote unquote rights, but our lands for future generations, and everything that we need to live on this earth is for everybody. So when Indigenous people stand up for the waters and the lands, it's not just for our own people, it's for everyone and everything. Sorry, I have to move my little people over again. He said, you bring everything back within yourself, and then you begin to see that the land is sacred and Mother Earth is a spirit, and that the world exists in everything. Nothing is separate, all is connected, and all is only really one. And the source of everything we come from as spiritual beings is love. And that's what Wilfred also said. And Elder Peter O'Chee said, you already know how to be a spirit. It's learning how to be a human being is where we need work. I always like that quote. What the Sturgeon told me is a painting that is based on a dream. So as I started to work with the plants and fast and go into ceremony and reconnect with the land and the waters, I was, really blessed to have a beautiful dream about this sturgeon. And I share it because I think that's why they came to me in my dream, and because they wanted me to share this story. So the sturgeon in my dream told me that it missed the frogs, and that sent me on a little bit of a journey to discover what did that mean? Why did they miss the frogs? And so I went and started looking up things to find out what is the relationship between the sturgeon and the frogs. And I came across this Anishinaabe website that said the sturgeon will wait for the frogs to sing before it will come home to spawn. And then I started to figure, do a little bit of research on sturgeons to find out that they have to be 25 years old in order for them to spawn. They'll only spawn in undisturbed, clean waters, and so many of the waterways, edge of waterways, are developed and disturbed. So they have a hard time finding places to spawn. Also, most of the rivers have been dammed. And so the fish ladders that they make are not big enough to accommodate the sturgeons. So they're not able to return to their places to spawn. And so the frogs have a relationship with the sturgeon, and the sturgeon have a relationship with the frogs that goes back a millennia. They speak to one another and they know one another. And so the frogs are missing the sturgeon. So this is what the sturgeon told me. Tree spirits leaving before the fire was again based on another dream. And it was a dream that I had about 25 years ago, where I saw the current struggle between us who stand up for the environment and the militarization of police forces against us. And saw this fire raging, and it was raging over these hills across from the Saskatchewan River. And as the fire was coming, these gigantic tree spirits began to raise up and leave before the fire hit them. There's more to the dream, but I won't share it. I don't know if I have that in there, sorry. So a lot of my work and study began with not only plants, but also with beadwork. So I started really looking at beadwork and really trying to understand, as a Métis person, culturally within our culture, within our nation, floral beadwork is like the bomb. So we have a lot of, floral beadwork is our thing, So I started really diving into it, because I do a little bit of beadwork, but I wasn't at that point, very good at it. And I didn't really understand how to do it. So I had to really study it. And so I started looking at Métis beadwork and historical beadwork, and I just found it fascinating to see how, with a limited palette, a limited color palette, how the beadworkers were able to create these beautiful, balanced, at times symmetrical works or asymmetrical works, and they, were just able to make everything pop on that black trade wool. And I also heard from Sherry Farrell-Rosette, who some of you may know, that that in the hardest times, so in 1885, when things were really bad for Métis people, we were, by that time really being pushed off of all our lands. Louis Riel had been hanged by the Canadian government. Our people were oppressed and living on road allowance and pushed out of our lands to make provincial and national parks. We were set to the margins of lands where we were not wanted, and forced out, sometimes by gunpoint, sometimes by fire, sometimes by other means. Anyway, so that what I found interesting, what Sherry said, was that in those times, women were making our floral beadwork even more dense, even more concentrated with color. And beadwork in that time was an act of resilience, and especially because of the impact of the churches and the ever heaviness of black clothing, black everything. The color of beadwork was vitally important. This was a painting that I did called Bandolier Bag for Steve Powley. It's 24 by 48 acrylic on canvas. And as you can see by the close-up detail, it's all done in dots. Steve Powley was a Métis hunter from Ontario who went and got a moose, and then his case, he was charged with illegal hunting, and his case went all the way to the Supreme Court, and we won. So this is my tribute to him. Coat for Harry is a coat for Harry Daniels. Again, Sherry Farrell-Rosette told me that Harry Daniels always wanted a coat, like a Red River style coat. And he really loved roses. That was his wild roses were his favorite. So after he passed on, I made a painting as a tribute for him too. And if anybody is not familiar with Harry Daniels, he's the Métis leader who got, with the help of a lot of other people in the background, including my dad, Métis rights into the Constitution. And it's important that, we always have our traditional protocols around copyright. Our traditional protocols, as I've been taught by Maria, is you always say, if you're telling a story, for example, you always have to say where you got that story, who you got that story from, under what circumstance you got that story. We never take. We have to give back to our communities. We have to say, we don't take people's beadwork patterns. We have to show that, but we have to be responsible to our traditional forms of copyright, which are not necessarily Canadian law copyright. They go a little bit further, I think, in the responsibility part to our communities. In this case, Jean Taillé is the great grandniece of Louis Riel. She's a Métis lawyer who also was part of the team that fought for Steve Palley's case at the Supreme Court. And so when I did this portrait of her, I asked her if I could use this beadwork from her great uncle's jacket, Louis Riel's jacket. And so in this case, the design is completely off of the artist who originally made this jacket. But following traditional protocols on copyright, I disclose this and I say where I got the designs from. Rosalie Laplante Larocque, this piece of beadwork was originally, I forget which museum. Sherry Farrell Reset knows which museum this is from. I think I got this image from her. Anyway, she said that that it was put into the dumpster after she passed away. It was at her office, and she worked in a little museum, and it was put into the dumpster, and her son rescued it. And I mean, when I look at it, I'm just blown away by the colors, and it looks like it's on a deep red or a black velvet. So I counted up the colors, and there were 17 colors, bead colors that she had used in this piece. And I think, like, I just like to look at how with a limited palette, there was no purples, no oranges, we're talking about just yellows, pinks, reds, and greens and blues and white, and then tones within that, and to see how it's possible to create this beautifully balanced piece with a limited palette. I'm fascinated by it. So as a tribute to Rosalie, I used a couple of hers patterns in this this larger piece called, I think this one is It All Depends on Who Holds the Shovel. Let's see. And Suzette Chalafoux-Smith, who's a relative of mine, she at the Edmonton, the old Hudson's Bay Fort, I guess, is they had all of their, what do they call those things? Those books with all of the stuff that they wrote in, the ledgers. They had all the ledgers of everything, and when people went to the fort much later, they found that many of the ledgers had been used for the Métis women's beadwork patterns, which I think is just really cool. Anyway, I put hers in that piece too, or a variation of hers. And so my patterns, I've been collecting my patterns for a really long time. I have now about four boxes at least full of just patterns that I make over time. I make new ones, and I look at plants and I get inspired, and then I simplify them down to, I sort of distill them down to simple beadwork patterns. And I've used them for beadwork and for paintings. This is another piece that I just think is just gorgeous. I just wanted to share it. It's of an octopus bag, and it's, I believe it was repatriated from the Earl of South Esk to, and I don't know which museum. Sherry Farrell Reset is somebody that you really should have on here, because she's like a walking wealth of information, and I really enjoy speaking with her, and I get a lot of my stuff from her. So I've painted this painting that you can see in the corner. It's a round painting that's 48 by 48. It's called From Earth to Sky. And then I decided that I wanted to bead it. So I got a quilting frame and I started beading it. And I you can see that I'm removing the tracing paper. I'm making it the exact same size replica. So 48 by 48 beadwork. In a circle. It's not done yet. It's like it's a lifetime project. I'm halfway done, and I kind of put it away for about 5 years, and I'll pick it up again and try and finish it. And who knows where it will go after that, but there it is on a quilting frame. So if you're ever like wanting to do a great big beaded piece, these foldable quilting frames work really well. Looks like I went early work, new work, mural pieces. It looks like I missed out on my early work section, so we'll just jump into this one. This is so I wanted to show that like my early work was small, and it was really they were really just simple pieces. And as I was studying the plants more, and as I was studying beadwork more and doing beadwork and getting more into things, the scale of my work started to increase. As I started to really understand the interconnection and importance of biodiversity and the environment to us and our lives, to understand the importance of water, all of these things began to impact me in a way that I wanted to create really big pieces, for a couple reasons. One, because they're fun. I really love them. Like this piece here, called My Heart is Beautiful. It's 12 feet wide by 9 feet high. There's over 300,000 dots on it, maybe. And I don't know how many plant species it depicts. And I like to combine beadwork patterns, sort of like imaginary plants, with sort of depictions of real plants. And I like to also include a lot of species at risk, and because there's a lot of things that people can talk about when it comes to seeing these works. And I show this piece. This was at the Thunder Bay Art Gallery. I show this piece to demonstrate the scale. There's another reason why I made them so big at first, which is not such an important reason for me anymore, but it was originally, which is that I thought that if I made large pieces, Métis people could no longer be ignored. And that's something that has happened. We've been political footballs between the governments for a very long time. We are still, except for the eight Métis settlements in the province of Alberta, we are still a landless people, and this needs to be remedied. So the process for me, I was asked to speak a little bit about the process of my work. So the process for me is I begin with priming the canvas. Sometimes I tint it, sometimes I don't. I staple the canvas to the wall, and then I just prime it and get it all flat. Then I begin to draw it out, and I draw it out in one side completely, and then I trace it. And this was me quite a long time ago. So I'm a lot older now, but I trace it out, and then I flip that over and retrace, and then I begin to paint, and I paint doing all these dots, as you know. And that's it in progress. This one is My Heart is Beautiful, the one that you saw there. In this piece, there was a time when I was going through like some pretty hard times, and sort of like those women of old who, when they were going through tough times, they made things really dense and colorful. I suppose that's what I've done here. Is I just wanted to sort of pour my heart out onto this canvas, and include a lot of color and a lot of the plants that I was becoming more familiar with and creating a relationship with. This one is called Honoring My Spirit Helpers, and it's another piece that's about 12 feet long, I believe. And it's done in a different style. It's not done with the dots. Well, it does have dots, but not as many. It's done with sort of a more solid colors. And I'm just tracing it here. So I have to trace it twice. So trace it once, and then you flip it over and trace it again. And you can't see it, but it's drawn out. And there's the initial background sort of colors. And as I'm developing it, I'm painting and I'm thinking about all of the things that it means. The water underneath was really important. I was living in a place that was right on Lake of the Woods, and we were going out fishing every day. So some of those things made their way into the piece, the finished piece. The rocks at the bottom represent the core of Mother Earth. It represents fire, as sort of represented through the sweat lodge. The roots are there to depict that there's more to our lives than what we see on the surface or in the physical realm. There's more to people, there's more to humans than what you see physically. The muskrat, it's a story about how the muskrat saved the world, traditional story. And that little perch that's in there is because we were fishing for walleye, and I got a perch and I tried to put it back in the water, but the hook was in a little bit too deep and I couldn't. So I just thought that I'd put that perch in there to honor it. And the pond lilies are in there, and I often do a lot of pond lilies in my paintings. I'm really fascinated with those roots. Again, it's based on a dream that I had. And so this one's called Honoring My Spirit Helpers, and it is currently in the collection of the 7th generation midwives in Toronto. Water Song is another piece that's about 6.5 feet by about, I want to say 9 or 10 feet across. I forget now how big it is. But this one is in the collection of the National Gallery of Canada, and it's my ode to water. I was in this one place down in the States, in California or Utah. Where was it now? I think it was called Zion National Park. And we, my daughter and I, we were just on this little bus, and the little bus takes you through the place. And it's, surrounded by desert in that area. And the pre-recorded announcements were on the bus, and the lady said, "Plants tell the story of water." And I just thought that was so beautiful, because if you really think about it, plants really do tell you where there's water. Plants tell the story of water. So that piece was the one that was with that I worked with Valentino to create that collection in 2016. This is it being drawn out again with the tracing paper, and then there's that's the detail, so you can see that the scale of the dots. And again, there's probably about 250,000 dots or 300,000. I don't know. I've never counted on this piece. And these little spiders here are in there. There's 4 little spiders with their spider webs, because as I was painting it, there was a spider on the canvas, one, and I was drawing around the spider, and the spider hung out there for 4 days. And finally, I clued in and said, I spoke to the spider and I said, "Oh, I'm sorry. I guess you want to be on my painting." And I didn't realize. I apologize. And then I went downstairs and I got a cup of tea, and I came back up and the spider was gone. So I put 4 for the 4 days that she hung out, until I finally clued in to include her in the painting. It's just I want to say I'm really connected and everything, but sometimes I'm pretty dense. It takes me 4 days apparently to clue into somebody's messages coming through. But I want to talk a little bit about the community arts and the language stuff that I've been involved in. So the Willisville Mountain Project, I used to live across from the Willisville Mountain in the Lacloche Mountain Range, which is just north of Manitoulin Island. And the project started with Sophie Edwards, John and Carrie Butler, and I in 2009, when we heard that Vale, which was then called Inco Mining out of Sudbury, and Vale is owned now by an international company. It's a mining company. That they had the quarrying rights for Willisville Mountain, and that they were planning on quarrying it because their other mountain that they had completely taken down was almost done as a quarry of the last 30 or 40 years. So they were planning on quarrying it. And it's a really important mountain. It's one of the tallest ones around. I mean, when we're talking about mountains, these are a mountain range that's older than the Rocky Mountains. So it's very much worn down compared to the Rocky Mountains. The Rocky Mountains are massive and huge compared to these mountains, but nonetheless, they are called mountains. And so the Willisville Mountain is one of the tallest ones. I used to live directly across from it, up on another mountain, and I could see it out my window every day. I would watch the wolves chasing the deer in the winter. I'd hear them. I'd pick plants, blueberries, and harvest medicines from the mountain, and it was important to everyone in the region. And so we decided to mobilize and see if we could do an art exhibit, inviting artists from across North America to submit their art. And we did this juried exhibit, and we got 45 artists in the end. And thanks to John and Carrie, who really pushed it forward after I had to leave. I had a marriage breakdown at the end of the first exhibit, and so I had to leave. But they continued it on the tours, and really through their media presence and through what this exhibit did to raise awareness about how many people loved this mountain and had experience with this mountain and didn't want it to be quarried, Vallée issued the official notice that they wouldn't be quarrying this mountain. So this is my first taste in how art saved a mountain, and how community mobilization around art can make a huge difference. And this is the piece that I did with my then partner, Wayne Pelche, and it's called Inco Killing the Sacred. This piece is in my basement right now. It's hanging up there. I haven't really shown it anywhere. I haven't really done anything with it. It's just kind of always been there. But I'm as I go back and I look at it again, after all these years, there are things that I really like about it. And there's things that I think are really sort of foreboding, I guess, in the sense of those big lights, those 4 industrial lights that are used, which now police forces and militarized police are using against Indigenous people when they stand up for their lands and waters. One of the first things they do, it's a tactic of intimidation, is to bring these bright lights in and blast them onto the protesters 24/7. We saw that in Standing Rock. We see it with the tiny house warriors. We see it everywhere. They're using lights as a tactic. So this is that piece anyway. And then Walking with Our Sisters. So Walking with Our Sisters began in 2012. The first exhibit was 2013, and it was in Edmonton. Myself and I started it, but then I quickly had a whole bunch of amazing kick-ass women join me onto the National Collective, and we began to organize. We had over 30 exhibits over the course of 7 years. We invited people to submit moccasin tops, sometimes they're called vamps. And these came from all over the world. I was expecting 600. We ended up getting over 2,000 in the end, and including for children, to recognize the children that never came home. And we quickly realized that this was not just a simple exhibit, that it was ceremony. It required following the protocols of the regions and the territories where we went. It involved community organizers in every single place. So the National Collective provided some guidance and some help, but really the work was done by the communities themselves. And it became a place to acknowledge and honor the lives of murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls in a way that was without judgment and without politics, in a way that allowed people to express their emotions and the outpouring of care that they have for our families and for our people. These are some of the vamps that came in. Sorry, I don't have the list of artists with me. Some of them came in as tributes to people who had known people who had gone missing or who had been murdered. And some of them were just simple acts of love. And this is a quote by one of my co-lead on the National Collective. Violence Indigenous women face is multifaceted, consisting of acts beyond abduction and murder. It includes not only physical, but spiritual, mental, and emotional violence, the removal of our children, and the removal of our children. This is a continued reality. It hasn't stopped, and it's not a historical thing. Tanya Capo. This was one of the ones, the pairs of vamps, that really moved me. When I got it, I admit I had a little cry for sure, because it's just really emotional. For those who might be dialed in and listening in, I'll just describe them. They're two moccasin tops, showing a chair with a tablecloth and a plate, and the chair is empty. And it says, clearing the table. Her mom would hold the empty plate to her lips, a silent prayer for her daughter's return. It still gets me going, still gets me emotional reading that. 10% of all female homicides in Canada are Indigenous women, and yet we only make up 3% of the female population. NWAC, the Native Women's Association, has found that only 53% of murder cases involving Indigenous women and girls have led to charges of homicide. This is dramatically different from the national clearance rate for homicides in Canada, which was last reported to be 84%, and that's from Statistics Canada. So this is a picture of the exhibit in Edmonton, the very first one that we did. And pretty much it followed the same sort of patterning of the rest of the exhibits in the 30 places that we went. And we involved community in every step of the way. Like I said, it became a commemoration, memorial in a way, ceremony. It involved a lot of things and not just art. But I shouldn't say, but it's just it was very powerful when it was going. And anyone who walked into the space really, really felt it. And I think that, again, this shows that how combining art with community mobilization, community organizing, can really create change, or at least change in the moment. If not permanent change, it can change attitudes, it can change hearts, it can change minds, it can change feelings and emotions. It can help. You know, I always shied away from saying that it was healing, because you can't presume to know that anyone has been healed or felt healed or anything like that. That would be really presumptuous. But you can say that it affected people in a way that opened their minds or opened their hearts, and perhaps created an impact that changed them for the good. My work with Onaman Collective is, I should probably just look at the time, just to see what time it is. Oh, I think we're good, right? Oh, 10 minutes. Okay, I'll just whip through. So my work with Onaman Collective is really important. It started with me and Isaac Murdoch and Aaron Consmo back in 2015. And this is us in Washington, D.C. But Aaron hasn't been involved for a while. It's just been me and Isaac for a long time. And we've painted banners that have been used all over. This one is in San Francisco in front of city to get people to divest from the Dakota Access Pipeline. We organized about 40 different community events, from storytelling to building banners. We've making banners. We've screen printed probably, at least 5,000 banners that we've sent out for free to different water and land protection actions across North America. We've organized water gatherings and tattoo gathering. We organized a couple language houses, immersion houses. And we started really doing things that were on the land, and that was really important. One of our first language houses was held in Stockwater Bay and Serpent River First Nation. That's the picture of it up on the left. In the right-hand bottom corner, that's us picking cattails to eat. We had a traditional foods gathering. In the bottom left, that's a huge piece of birch bark being harvested by us. And then in the top right-hand corner, that's at Stockwater Bay. We were in tents for a few years until we started to build Nimkiajabika. And then we decided to make it permanent. And so me and Isaac and a few other like-minded people began to build a permanent 24/7, 365 days a year camp on the land that is primarily a language and arts camp. Right now, everything is really quiet because of COVID, so we don't really have anyone there, just us. And we have solar panels now, thanks to Melina Labakan and Sacred Earth Solar. We've got a language and arts studio that we were able to build thanks to Seventh Generation and Calliope Foundation. So we've built our cabins, and aside from the youth collective who obtained a couple grants, so there's a separate sort of body of a youth collective, and Isaac and I don't have anything to do with that, but they have obtained a couple government grants. But aside from that, the whole building of the camp, everything to do with this camp has been done 100% without any government funding. And it's something that we're really proud of, because we had to really haul ass. Like, we worked so hard to raise funds constantly. All of, as it was said off the top, all of my award money, my copyright release money, even paintings, the murals that Isaac and I did. We went around, we painted murals all over, and all the money from the murals that we painted went back into the camp to build we have 6 cabins. And Isaac and his partner Shannon live there full time. Mary Wemigwan is one of our elders, and the youth, Taryn and Quinn, live there full time. I'm the only one that doesn't live there full time, but I would say I live there half the time. So you were trying to create space where once COVID's over, we'll have this space where people can come and learn the language and really concentrate on creating art, whether that's land-based arts or contemporary arts, in ways that don't follow the clock, but follow the seasons, in ways that follow the natural rhythms of the land and the natural laws of the land. And it's a way as I'm not Anishinaabe, I'm the guest in that territory, but everyone else there is Anishinaabe. And as Quinn says, he's one of the youth there, he says it's a place for Anishinaabe people to do Anishinaabe things. So I'm just happy to be part of it. And it's a great privilege and honor for me to be part of it and to help out. And plus, learning the language Anishinaabemowin has been really important for me, because my daughter is half Anishinaabe, and it's important for me because it's a doorway into Cree, and I've been learning Cree recently too. And what I've learned in Anishinaabemowin has really helped me in Cree. It's the same language group and same language, and foundationally the grammar structure is the same. So it's been really important that way. So I'll just finish off with some new work. I hope that it's okay that I can just talk about this for a minute. It's this work started when COVID hit. So I came to my place in Espanola and I started to just paint. And so this piece is titled "The Trees Are Your Lungs, the Rivers Your Veins," he said. "As you breathe, so does the world. The crow taught her, and she listened." And so this is going back to the idea of when we return to the simple natural laws of the land, we can stem the climate crisis. We can fix the problems that we're having on this earth, and we can create a better future for the coming generations. And that's the thing that I like to have hope for, that human beings will, get it, that we will kind of turn capitalism on its head. I was thinking about this in the sense of decolonization. We like to talk about decolonization a lot, and we like to take action and try and decolonize. But I also think that linked very heavily to that is decapitalism. And we need to really think about how the capitalist system is so deeply tied to democracy now, whereas it's not even a real democracy. And decolonization includes decapitalization. And if we think about it in those terms, then it might help us to understand what we need to do to move towards a place that is more in line and in sync with the natural world. And so this is another piece that I painted after. It's called "Where Does Your Power Come From?" And in this piece, this is my daughter is the model. she's powering off her phone. And I have just started to really notice with my own self and how social media has been making me feel. I've taken it off of my phone. I've taken it for the most part. I keep sort of putting it back on and taking it off. I've taken Messenger completely off my phone, and just unplugging from social media has been really important for creativity, and how it, for me anyway, how social media seems to suck out my creativity, and I get no good or new ideas when I'm engaged in social media. Whereas when I disengage and unplug from it for really good, long, extended periods of time, I can feel ideas coming back. And so and of course, in this painting, "Where Does Your Power Come From?" The crow is there again to remind us, and the flowers are there again to remind us that the power and everything comes from the earth. Fish swim in freedom that I can only dream of. So sometimes I write poems to go with my pieces, and this one is, "If I could live a million years, and I could live a million years and never understand why some have wings and some have fins. Some fly in the air and some soar on waves. I hardly know anything except that while standing at the shore in front of water, below fish swim in a freedom I can only dream of." And I've been doing a lot of thinking about freedom and what does that mean, and what did it mean to our people? What did it mean to our ancestors? The idea of no borders, the idea of the freedom to be whoever you wanted to be, the idea of going where your people needed to go, the idea of just not having the restrictions that we have imposed on us now as Indigenous people. I think a lot about freedom. And this is my most recent piece. It was done last night. I just finished it. It's called "Two Pink Frogs." And it's just a lot of fun to do something a little bit different in pink. And hopefully people will listen to pink frogs, because they don't listen to the green ones. And so that's it. Thank you very much. I'll stop there. And I appreciate your time. Thank you.
That was incredible, Christi. Oh my goodness. I'm just going to applaud for a little bit longer, because I'm just so incredibly just blown away by such incredible knowledge you shared. So rich, so grounded and rooted in that great way with land-based practice. I'm pretty excited for our conversation tomorrow, and I've really enjoyed the questions that have been coming into the chat, and we'll definitely keep track of those. And just for all of you that took the time to join us today, we're in 2022 now, and just really value that. And just to thank, just one little thought, because I don't want to detract from tomorrow, but that it's so incredible to say decapitalization in regards to decolonization, because I find like decolonization is kind of like reconciliation. It's just a big word, and we don't really always know what to do with it and what that means. And so to kind of add decapitalization to it, we immediately allow ourselves to go into action. We know how to decapitalize because we're it's something tangible. So just want to say thank you so much for that offering. It's huge.
Thanks. Good. Well, I'm looking forward to our conversation tomorrow. And yeah, thank you everybody for tuning in. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to listen to me. And I really appreciate all your love and support. It's, when you're an artist working alone, which, painters and writers and most people do that. When you're an actor, you get all the love. When you're a musician, you do too. But when you're an artist, like a painter, and it's a lonely gig. So you don't often get a chance to really know if what you're doing is making any impact at all. Does anybody ever do they even care? So it's really good. It's really nice to be on this today, and I thank you very much for the invitation.
I just want to say how incredibly grateful I am for Christi Belcourt and the sharings that she offered yesterday. So I'm looking forward to our conversation today. So let's just welcome Christi Belcourt.
Well, hello, everybody. Back again. This is, I'm really looking forward to this conversation today with you.
Yeah, me too. I was listening when you were doing the your family introductions. A lot of the names that you were naming are in my home community of Fort Smith. So just above the Alberta border. And so the Toronjos, the one that got me was Larocque. So I haven't heard Larocque other than that was my grandfather's last name. He wasn't my real grandfather. That was my grandmother's partner up until he passed away at 96 a number of years ago. But that's who raised me on the land, was Archie Larocque.
Yeah, that's my great grandmother's name, my dad's grandma.
Yeah, and so his history was, he was born in Fort Fitz, and his mother was a Flett, but his grandfather, he said, was part of the Louis Riel Rebellion way back in the day, and that when Louis Riel's when they disbanded because of the government, his grandfather ended up in Fort Vermilion, and so then that's how I think maybe they probably got up north.
Yeah, that's probably how. I mean, a lot of people moved around after 1885, after 1870, really, in Red River, when the first resistance was taken up by us and fought. Not the first of all resistances, but the first in our history that was significant, in the sense that that was when the first Métis provisional government was formed. It was before Canada had illegally claimed the land through the illegal sale of land through Rupert's Land. Can you imagine that? Like, just think about that for a minute. This idea that a company, would own, Hudson's Bay Company would just arbitrarily own a landmass the size of what, like just arbitrarily own all that land, just granted from some, I don't even know how they got granted that ownership. And then all of a sudden they decide that they're going to sell all of this land to Canada. It just, it baffles the mind to think that somehow that we are not all sitting on, stolen land in that sense, like it just how the whole of Canada the foundation of Canada is based on theft of land. And it's the biggest land, not just Canada, but wherever the British Empire went, wherever the Europeans went and colonized, it's the biggest land theft in the history of the world, I think. It just baffles the mind, the history, really.
Yay. And that teachings, like to learn all that and kind of incorporate that, and like that, my grandfather used to talk about how he was known as the man who knew the barren lands better than anyone, knew the barren lands like the back of his hand, Métis trapper his whole life. And I learned not when I got older, I realized the value of Métis knowledge, how Métis knowledge is quite different than First Nations and Inuit knowledge, and that Métis knew land so well and knew the history of it so well, and that we learned through that lens, I think, is quite powerful. And it really isn't all of your work. I mean, it kind of blew me away, and I'm so grateful for yesterday. But I wrote down the anthropomorphize. It's like you do the opposite of anthropomorphize. It's, how we take human emotions and put them into animals so that we can create a sense of awareness of land and place. But you actually do the opposite. You bring plants and animals into human so that we are able to see ourselves in the land and the environment. And that really kind of struck quite hard yesterday.
That's interesting. I don't think I ever consciously sort of thought of it that way.
Yeah, just that when you think about the pink frogs, like I was looking at the pink frogs yesterday, and the teachings of, and what really struck was the teachings of the sturgeon and the frog and those stories, and then bringing that into your work. It doesn't, it allows us to see ourselves in that world. Whereas I find sometimes when we think about climate change, we are always trying to bring humans into their world. And I don't know if that's, that's the as in depth or as cohesive as it is to kind of bring us into that world and see it through their eyes, or not their eyes. But
I think one of the things I've observed in my 55 years of life on this planet is that we human beings are very self-centered. We like to see ourselves at the center of everything. We think we are the center of everything, and we aren't. But I think it's like we're very species centric, I suppose, if that's even a word. But that's the way I sort of see how we behave when it comes to even thinking about issues of quote unquote rights. We put the idea of our rights in front of other species' rights. So even though as Indigenous people, we might have a understanding and a belief system that's strong and healthy and beautiful and vibrant in the idea of how we are connected to the land, there are occasions when we have put our sense of this fighting for rights above the rights of other species to their territories. So like the little people or the spirits of the land, that's some of those places, as we know, are sacred sites. Those places are their territories. They're not ours, and we know that. We're respectful when we go to those places. We provide offerings when we go to those places. Lots of people will be quiet, or they'll know how to behave in a certain way when they go to these places that they've been. And this knowledge is something that's been handed down for thousands of years, from generation to generation. So we understand the land. We know the land. There's still people who do know the land like the back of their hands, thank goodness. And there's people who do carry that knowledge and those stories. But unfortunately, sometimes in our politics, we can get lost, I guess is the best way to say it. And we tend to sometimes lose sight of those things, or maybe some of our politicians weren't taught those things. And so they end up saying that, we have a right, for example, to the moose, let's say, just for example. So a lot of times there'll be fights over moose. So they'll be like, we have the right to the moose. And then other people will say, no, we have the right to the moose. And then somebody will say, well, I have tags for the moose. And then it becomes a human to human fight for the moose. And even at the same time, we're watching the populations dwindle. We're seeing clear cuts. We're seeing that the moose's territory is not being protected. And I was thinking about the idea of rivers being given the rights to personhood, which in New Zealand that's happened. So it has happened in the world where rivers and bodies of water have been given legal rights, I guess, as a person. And I was thinking, if corporations can be given personhood status, then why can't rivers and lakes be given personhood status, considering that they've, provide so much life and really sustain life on Earth. So sometimes I think it's important to put other species and understand that other things, spirit species, other things have a right to exist as much as we do. And that we can all coexist in a way that is sustainable.
Amazing. Yeah, I think I listened to a news story a couple weeks ago where it was, I think in Arizona, but that water is connected to the peoples in that area. And some of the concerns was, well, what if we don't have access to that water because they do? And it's just such a backwards way of thinking, because, the water exists and brings life because of sustainability, not because of ownership. So yeah, it's powerful to think about that way. And yeah, when I was looking at I was amazing to hear you talk about the beadwork patterns that you have, and how many aunties and moms and friends like have those cutout thick like the back of the drawing pad, the back of that with all the cutout and pen, and then they cut it out and then they keep it in a folder. So it's pretty amazing to see yours. I was like, oh my God, there's those pattern cutouts. And just honoring and recognizing where those patterns come from. I mean, why do you think that that's a really important thing to do, to acknowledge where those patterns come from?
Well, it's like I was saying yesterday, it has to do with traditional copyright protocol. So we always had that built in, as far as I have been taught, that we've always had that built into our understanding of how to be polite human beings with one another is, we don't take other people's patterns without asking. There are times when I think people copied patterns in the sense of, there's been like, when you look at the octopus bag, for example, that's those beaded bags with the 8 fringes that hang down, or not fringes, but sort of like tabs that hang down. And that pattern, I don't even know where the original octopus bag pattern came from, but Métis people made that bag a lot. There's a lot you can see it in museum collections, and we still make that bag. But it was also in, you see it in Cree beadwork, you see it in Cree, I guess not just beadwork, but I guess material culture. You see it in Cree material culture, you see it in Tlingit material culture, you see it in, like, it that pattern passed around, for this octopus bag. The patterns pass around sometimes from community to community, and you don't really know. So there's a kind of a really neat sort of overlap or blending sometimes. Like, that's why in museum collections you can see beadwork that, clearly it looks like it's either Métis or Métis Cree, or maybe Métis Anishinaabe or Anishinaabe or Cree. Like, there's this sort of like this kind of like same thing happening, but then at the same time you can pinpoint where beadwork comes from, which I find really fascinating. Yeah. Like the community of Ile Lacrosse has its own mojo going on when it comes to beadwork patterns. And so you can, like, when you see a pair of moccasins or a jacket or something from there, it comes from there, it comes from that community. So I think that there's kind of a really neat identity connection that can happen with beadwork, not just historical beadwork, but like contemporary beadwork. Even we're watching an explosion right now, like of Indigenous beadwork artists and other, quill artists and artists that are using all sorts of materials that are just in abundance to us right now, whereas before they would have been rare or sometimes scarce. The colors have exploded. I think that there's like a whole a whole study that could be done just on earrings alone right now. There's like, it's all like, look at your earrings, look at my earrings. Like, there's a whole thing happening. There's a movement of earring artists happening right now. It's exciting to watch, on social media.
Yeah, I bring it up because my mother's a traditional bead worker, and she learned in Fort Good Hope, Northwest Territories, with Luciane Yakalai and Judy Lafferty, and their mother Mary, and similar to what you're sharing for beadwork down south. Up north, I could tell you each community. I could tell you where that beadwork came from, and I can almost tell you who sewed it. Earrings now is a bit of a different ride. I could maybe tell you who made it, but I think what's important to talk about is that artistic inspiration of designs, because we are seeing where someone will come up with a great pattern and then we'll see it in two different places somewhere else. And my mom was like, I don't mind sharing my stuff on Instagram, and I don't care if people copy me. I'm just happy to have it out there. But also it's important to recognize that people's creativity is their creativity, and that, being inspired by, and so acknowledging where that came from. Like when you look at those patterns, I look at my mom's, it'll say like Judy on there or Luciane on there, so that she goes, oh, I got this style from this person. And so there is a protocol that goes with it, and it is exploding. I cannot tell you the thousands of dollars that I have in earrings right now. It's ridiculous.
I had a social media thing not too long ago where I just sponsored the deadliest earring contest, and I got people to submit their collection of earrings and also like deadliest quill work, deadliest, like all these things. So it was a lot it was just for fun, and it put a little bit of money into some people's pockets, and then other people pitched into it. And so, I think the winners got like a couple $100 each or something. It was good. It was a lot of fun. But yeah, that the patterns are identifiable, and that's our copyright. And I think that there's a confusion between like when I've had people like message me and they'll show me a replica of my painting. So they'll like have they'll replicate it like exactly or close to, and then they'll say, look at the work I did inspired by your painting. And so there's like, no, that's a copy, that's not inspired by. And I think it's important to like understand that we do have these traditional kind of copyrights within our communities. We understand them, we know them, and we respect them and follow them. And among beadworkers and sewers, it seems to be like just people understand it really well. Whereas with painting and other things, it's a little bit not so understood. Yeah.
Yeah, those conversations have yet to kind of happen. And do you think it's because it kind of goes outside of that Indigenous kind of ways of knowing, or is that, or is it because the communities are a little bit smaller so that they're able to kind of stay a bit more connected?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
All good. We didn't get to see a lot of your early work yesterday, but you did mention that it was like you do big work, and that you started small and then just kind of went really, really big. And that I noticed, you talked about like the 300,000 dots in your pieces. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you kind of grew into doing dots?
Sure. I started with a pair of mucklucks that were given to me by I say my aunt because that's what I called her, but it was my ex-husband's aunt. So my daughter's great auntie. And those mucklucks were on my wall for like a good long time. I just kind of hung them up because they were too big. And I just admired them. I've always had beadwork around me growing up, so I've always like it's part of the house kind of thing, and it's artwork to me all the time, even though I'll wear it. And I just was staring at them one day and I thought, oh, I should do a painting, based on this beadwork. And so I tried to do it, and it was really bad. It was a bad painting. And then so I started kind of like realizing like, oh, I don't really understand the way plants are constructed. and I don't understand the way beadwork is done. So I better, sort of start paying attention. And then that kind of got me on this. I got really obsessed, like obsessed. And I started to just every single plant that I would see, I would crouch down, I would look at it, I would try and see how it grew. I would watch to see where does the branch hook up to the stem, what shape is the leaf, what color is it, and I would take photos as close up as I could in macro, and then I'd go back to my computer and like blow them up and like really take a good look, and then I'd start to distill these patterns out of them and make patterns on the back of cereal boxes and birch bark and all sorts of things. And then as I got into that, and then I was also looking at beadwork and historical beadwork and started really understanding the patterns and how do people put things together. And so that just all kind of melded. At first, I was making sort of paintings like the one behind me. So it was like with lines, and then I would do like the very first ones I did were lines and solid colors and just a few dots to sort of kind of like suggest beadwork. And then it got to like the one behind me, which is like more dots on the solid colors, until I finally just got rid of the solid colors and the lines altogether and just started doing complete dots. And when I did that, it was like something had opened up, like a door had opened up, and I was like, oh, okay, I see what I'm doing here. This is better. I like this. This is good. I still do the one behind me sometimes, but then I just started getting really into this idea of doing them on black, because black is like the old trade wool. That's why I'm doing it on black, is because it's emulating that old beadwork. And from what Maria told me, Maria Campbell, who I mentioned yesterday, what she told me was, she said that women used to, like our women, Métis women, used to really love that old dark trade wool because first of all, it was so soft, and it was, at the time, it wasn't rough. It was very soft and very beautiful and easy to work with, and very easy to sew on. And then the colors of the beads were just popping right off of it, so that's why my paintings are black.
It's very distinctly Métis as well. Like again, up north, we sew on hide, we sew on moose hide and caribou hide. And so when I see black velvet, or I see your black background, like your art, it does reflect a Métis feel to it, because that it is something that kind of goes together.
Yeah, we do it on hide too. Definitely, we're hide tanner people. I was just given it was like the best gift. My dad's cousin. So my great grandmother had hide scrapers and this old shawl. I think it's great. Anyway, and my dad's cousin, so it would have been my dad's auntie. She had the hide scrapers that were passed down to her, and then when she passed away, she gave it to her daughter, and then her daughter contacted me, that's my dad's cousin, and said, what should I do with these? And I was like, I am hide scraping now. This is like, I'm starting to learn, and this would be like the biggest thing that I could ever have. So she sent them to me, and I have these hide scrapers that are I don't even know how old they are, but I have one flesher and two fleshers and one scraper, and it's like just really, I had a little cry when I got them, just a little, because it's just so touching to receive something. It's the only thing I have that is of my great grandmother's, and to know that she was sitting there doing everything like everybody else was doing, which was tanning hides and sewing moccasins and sewing things, and but the dots of color don't pop on a deep rich brown the way that they pop on black. So that's one of the reasons why I keep painting on black too.
Oh, I know you had Mila at your camp, Nakeko, and she's such an amazing moose hide tanner.
She is like a warrior woman. I love her so much. She is incredible. Like, she's just, you speak to her and she's so soft and so lovely, and you know that she can just kick ass. And, she knows so much, like her knowledge is rich and deep, and she doesn't hoard it. She shares it when she comes to teach in communities, which is she's come down to Anishinaabemowin a couple times. And when she teaches everything, and she doesn't hold back. She gives you everything so that you can be the best hide tanner that you can be. I really love her.
Yeah, in her tools, I'm sure she shared with you, her tools were given to her. So it's very similar, not great, but definitely it had skipped a generation. And because those tools came to her, that's how she began. Yeah, there's power in those tools.
It sure is. Makes you really appreciate the moose so much too, so much more when you're scraping the hide. So like when she first came up, it just happened that as she was being driven from the airport, which is like a good 3 hours away from Anishinaabemowin, and there was a moose that was hit on the side of the road. So the guys went over to go get it, and it was sad because it was a pregnant moose. So we took back. There was other people there too that wanted some too. So we took back the hide, the head, and parts of the moose. And out of that moose, we made scrapers, we made sinew, we had lots to eat, and we had a feast, and we made offerings. We had the brain to tan the hide. We of course we tanned the hide, and that was the first hide we did there at the camp. And it was just like such a moving thing to, I've had lots of moose meat in my life, and I really respect and appreciate the moose, but I don't think it's like you don't think that you could love any deeper than you do, and then you find a new level of love. That's what happened. I found a new level of love for the moose that I didn't think that I had in me, but it was there.
Wow. And you see the moose when you do your banners for Water is Life and land defending, you have the moose there with a little heart, which is so cute.
Yeah.
With the art that you create with the Onaman Collective and with Isaac Murdoch, it's been so impactful for land defenders and water defenders. And I just was kind of curious on how that came to be. Like, why did that art movement become part of that, or why did you feel inspired to create that as part of an art movement or advocacy?
Well, I don't think when it started, I wouldn't have said that it was an art movement in the sense that you don't think of it like that. You just take action, right? So, and as artists, that's what we know how to do best. So we just take action in the way that we know how to do it. So part of that is you create art because you're inspired in the moment to do it, and then you share it and other people pick it up. And one of the things that we did when we started doing these things, because we're thinking about this stuff all the time, and we're environmentalists, and we believe in our people, and we believe in the strength and knowledge of our people to understand how best to take care of our lands and waters. So of course we stand on the side of water protectors and land defenders and land protectors, because they're really putting their bodies on the line for the rest of the world. And so we just didn't really do much thinking about it. We just create these images, and then we're like, let's do a bunch of screen them up into banners, and then send them out there for free, because there's people taking actions in solidarity all across the country or whatever. And so we just ended up doing that over and over, to the tune of about 10,000 banners at least, all over. We went all over North America and to different communities. We did some in Colorado with a community there to support their trying to get their anti-fracking stuff happening. Like the fracking wells in Colorado are unbelievable. Like just they're everywhere, and they're just thousands of them and right next to schools. And, it's just, it's really sad to see what human beings are doing to the planet and to the waters. And so when we started doing those banners, we just, that's what we did. And then people wanted more of them. And so we put them up online on our website and as downloadable PDFs that people could download and then burn onto screens and then do their own art builds. And we learned this from David Solnit. I should mention him from 350.org in San Francisco, Oakland. We met him in Winnipeg with oh shit, my brain is just fried. Sorry, I just forgot. But anyway, we met him and we did an art build there. And then we went to Standing Rock and we ended up bumping into him there and he was doing an art build there. So we sort of got on this thing with banners through David. And then he came up to Toronto one time and helped us with one. And David is really an incredible art activist when it comes to land protection and labor rights and things like that. So I'll just do a shout out for him.
Yeah, art activist, not art movement. Yeah, definitely. That's it's not about the art, it's about the action of change. That's really what it's incredible that I mean, how does one, we advocate in the way that we know, right? Like, and so, through art, through voice, through singing, I mean, we're artists and we have the gift of seeing the importance of voice and place and our world in it. And I'm curious, like, how did that come from your life, your growing up to becoming a visual artist? And then was the activism always there and then the art came, or was the art there and then the activism? How did you become you, Christi?
That's funny. I don't know. I mean, you just do a lot of things in your life if you're blessed to live old enough, and you just get to do everything. I don't know. I think first of all, it starts with understanding, like I was saying yesterday, how much we have to live in gratitude for the way that the earth supports us as a species. We have to be in gratitude and awe of the beauty of this world. And then you naturally want to step in and protect it. We have to. And we have to do so. We have to say something. I was thinking, my mom was telling me the other day, my mom Judith, she was saying, it's the studies. She was talking about some study that was done on how do what is the makeup or the breakdown of human kind of like left-leaning, right-leaning, and how can things like that we think are so horrible happen, like with what humans are doing, like to each other and whatnot in wars and stuff like that. Why does that happen? And she was saying that she was reading that 20% of people are left-leaning to the point where they will never be moved from the left. 20% are so right-leaning that they will never be moved from the right, I mean, but there are 60% who sit in the middle that will sway one way or the other, whichever way the wind blows, and it's the 60% that are, when they don't speak up, when they don't say anything, when they don't do anything, then the people who are hell-bent on destroying the earth are getting away with it because the 20% are not enough to tip the scale. I was also watching this documentary once where there was these deers, they were studying these deer, and the deer were in their, I don't know, they were going to go to their winter spot, which was over by some water. And these filmmakers were filming them and saying, okay, well, let's watch the moment because where their spot was right in the middle of 3 possible watering spots where they normally went. So they want to know, how did the deer make the decision to travel to which one? you know. And so what they did was they filmed them, and they thought that it was going to be the male, the biggest, strongest male, that was going to be the one that made the decision. And what they found was at one point, all of the deer lifted their heads, and they all faced different directions. And then at one point, over 50% of them faced one direction, and the rest of them turned and walked towards that spot. And I thought, you know, that's really beautiful, first of all. And second of all, you know, there is a way of collective decision making that works. We are not in tune as we could be. You know, being spiritual beings having a human experience, we are not in tune with the earth. There's lots of stories where people, you know, lots and lots of historical records and stories passed down within our nations that talk about people that speak to animals, people that understood animals, people that could communicate with plants. People still can, some, but it's not like maybe it was before. And spiritual powers that people would get from fasting or from dreams or from birth or from near-death experiences or whatever. And this connection that we have to the earth, we can all have, you know, and we'd had systems within all of our Indigenous nations, all Indigenous nations across the planet. We had systems, or have systems, that understand how to live in balance with the earth, that still provide for everybody. And I think that there is a way to get there. It's kind of a hard path, though, when the solidification of corporation into personhood status happened, and since, you know, free trade and all of those, the globalization of and commodification of goods, and you know, all these things have sort of put it makes the path there harder. But if we can get to that over 50% of us all facing in the same direction, perhaps we'll be ready to walk to life-sustaining places.
Oh my God. That's amazing. There was a question there about how do you have hope, but that is such a poignant way of creating hope. You know, it is hard when we see so much destruction around us and the environment. It is really hard to be hopeful, but trusting. You know, I hear a lot about from you. I just hear a lot of trust and belief that the earth is there, and that we can still connect with her and everything that can be offered.
Yeah, the earth isn't dying, it's us, and we're taking the species with us. The earth is powerful. The earth will regenerate, and I want the next generations to be there with that regeneration, and it is possible.
Thank you for that. We've talked about all of that, all of this, all of that.
Pretty great.
Oh, there was a great question about when that was asked by I think it was Jody Spotted Bear, was asking about like the walking with our sisters just had such an impact. That it had traveled quite a few places, and that it was really a community motivated I don't know if it's exhibition or if it was like it was very community connected and generated. And there was just a curiosity of how did you see that happening, or what were some of the conversations, or how did that become so powerful from your perspective?
Well, you know, it was just, I can remember when the media was just starting to report on murdered and missing Indigenous women, and they were saying allegedly, you know, 612 was the number that they were throwing out there. And they got that through NWAC's initial, Native Women's Association of Canada's initial research. And then I can remember when that when they started taking out the word allegedly, and it became kind of like people really understood that this was real. And for many, many years in silence, communities were grieving the losses. And if you weren't directly impacted, you would know somebody who was. And so it's so widespread that so many people felt the grief and the impact. And then when mainstream Canada was alerted to it in a way that made them understand that it was real, then the outpouring of their compassion happened as well. And so, and that's always the goal. The goal is never to have unending conflict. The goal is to bring awareness to the point where things can change.
Yeah.
And we really do need to acknowledge that it's easy, especially, and for me, I'm talking about for myself, I can get pretty cynical about Canadians on a whole, in the sense that the education system is failing them. It seems like the same crap that I went through, my daughter has to go through, and our grandchildren will go through, and it's just like never ending cycle of these generations of ignorance. But there are a lot of Canadians who are not like that, and who are compassionate, and who do want things to change, and who are willing to see that change. And I have to remind myself of that we're not, constantly faced with militarized police forces from all like, it's all of us, the people who feel this sense of compassion, that are going to make this change. So how did it become so powerful? I think it was partly for spiritual reasons. I think that there was it became pretty apparent from the elders in each of the communities that would say, a lot of the spirits of the women weren't resting, and that they did ceremonies to facilitate that and help that. So I think that spiritually speaking, there was mysterious things that I don't understand that were happening. Then there was this outpouring of love and compassion, and that in itself is powerful. Like if you have groups of people outpouring love and compassion, that's unstoppable. And I think that it giving people also control in their communities to do it in the way that they needed to do it, following traditional protocols of their territory, was vitally important. Mm-hmm. There was I mentioned Wilfred Pelche yesterday. He was an elder from Wiigwaam First Nation. That's the community my daughter's partly from. So he was really important in my life. And he had this story about Lester B. Pearson going to the community of Wiigwaam. So before Lester B. Pearson became prime minister, he was the MP for the region, I guess. And he was invited into the community and would go and have dinner and whatnot. Well, he was MP every once in a while. But when he became prime minister, I guess he said that he wanted to go there. But the PMO's office got involved, the prime minister's office got involved. And they, went into the community ahead of time and tried to sort of control the dinner. So he said that, normally what would happen is the people that made the best pies just made the pies, and the people that did the turkeys made the turkeys. And there's a beautiful organization that happens without words in community. And people know who people are that do the things that they do, and nobody has to control it or organize it, or it's an organic way of living in community where people just do the best that they do, and they bring to the table their gifts. And so he said that, but when the PMO's office got involved, they were trying to direct the turkeys and the pies and the whatnot. And so turkeys were left in ovens and people were waiting on instruction on whether they should bring them down. The wrong people were making the pies, and it turned into a big chaos. And, I always remember that story. And Wilfred was always so humorous. And I remember that story because when it came to walking with our sisters, I thought, we have to let people bring their gifts to the table and let people do what they do best, and be smart enough to step out of the way and just trust that community has this. They've got it. When you try and govern things from the top down, it doesn't work. You have to allow the power of other people to be recognized and respected, so that it can come out and bloom and be beautiful and strong. So I think about that a lot, how it's really important not to presume and not to step in on other people. Sometimes it's best just to back off and let other people shine.
Mm-hmm. And it was, just listening to you share about the ceremonies that were happening, or the unrest of the women's in the family. They were probably like, my mom actually sewed pieces and donated, and she was compelled, like they were compelled, and it creates a way to put some of that unrest into something that can be so tangible, like sharing the vamps yesterday with a little plate, and that she used to put her lips on the plate, like that was so powerful, because we never forget, right? And no matter where you are, you're always connected to home, connected to family, and that's so, and that you're never forgotten. And I think that's really what's important to remind ourselves, is that even though we're away, we could be gone for decades, but we're never forgotten. And no matter how you live, right? I think that's so powerful. Yeah,
and the families really, sometimes in some of the communities, in places that I got to attend, I didn't attend all of them, but I got to attend some of them. And in some of them, there was special ceremonies held for families, or families were given the opportunity to talk, or were part of the organizing committee. So it was really important that families had a voice there. And it was sort of solemn in a way, but it was also really moving. I remember I went to Winnipeg and I was helping to install there, and this couple came in. They were a non-native couple, and they were old. They were, quite old. I would say late 70s, at least, maybe early 80s. And they came in and wanted to see the exhibit before it was opened. And I said, you can't unless you volunteer to help. Kind of cruel that way, I guess. And I just, I should have just said, go ahead. But, in the end, it worked out okay, because they did volunteer. They sat there, they helped for about an hour and a half or something. And then after, the man came up and he held my hands and he was crying. And he said, I just didn't know. I just didn't know. And that's all he said, and so I think about also the families of one of the murdered young women from Winnipeg. They came and they walked, and they said that, they said, oh, this pair stands out more than any other pair. And the pair that they had identified was one that was made specifically for their daughter. And they didn't even know that. And then we flipped the vamp over to look at it, and it said her name and who the artist was who made it. And they just, they had a real moment. They said, I didn't think so many people cared. And that was like, there was a lot of things that happened in all the communities. None of this will ever be recorded. It had happened in a moment, in real time, and it was beautiful, and it was strong, and it was great.
incredible, powerful. Mm. I just like to give space for thought because it's so it's like so rich what you're, and I just don't want to jump into like something else to not honor and recognize those incredible moments that were able to happen and healing, that's able to happen. When you're, this was just one kind of a practical question that came in from Joan Borsa. The question was, in your big work, do you have helpers that create those big pieces with you, or do you do them by yourself?
That's a good question. I do them by myself. I really wish that I could have a very large studio that would have a whole staff, and then I would be able to like create all of the ideas that I have in my head. So I will die before all of the ideas that I have in my head stored up are exhausted. So I have like I've got at least 10 or 20 paintings sitting here in my head, just waiting. And so I wish that I did have a big support network to help, because honestly it takes a lot to do them. Like they're faster than beadwork, but they're definitely slower than abstract expressionism, I think. Sometimes I was like, why wasn't I an abstract expressionist? That would have been awesome. I'd be able to just really work fast, but they take like a whole month from start to finish. And when I say a month, I'm talking about like getting up in the morning, making a coffee, getting painting right away, taking a few breaks here and there for like maybe having a meal or taking care of an email, and then going to bed at around 1 or 2, and then getting up and doing it again and again and again and again and again until it's all done. So this is day after day after day after day, and it's like I can't paint fast enough. So I do wish that I had like studio assistants, but that hasn't happened yet. I had one person, one of my friends helped me out a little bit with some water once, and that was good. And then Isaac has helped me a couple times, like on a few little things like leaves and things like that, but for the most part, no.
And there's one question, I think it's a good to end it on, because we have like 5 minutes left, is to talk about the camp and like what inspired it, what your fundraising always, and creating this space. And I think we could go out with just hearing about your camp and what you see it, what you see it impacting in the future and all of that.
Well, that I like ending on that too. That's a good one. So the camp, Nimki Ajabakong, like I said, was started with me and Isaac and other people like Taryn and Quinn and Mary and Linda, and there's a lot of people that have been involved. And we started it to have a space that would be moving towards observing and respecting the natural law, the rhythms of the land, and to have it also be a space where language could be taught and thrive. So it's a language camp, but then it's also a land-based learning camp. And then it's also traditional and contemporary arts place. And we say camp, but it's not really a camp because there's people that live there. So it was always meant to be a place where people could come and learn and be together and learn in a way that was beyond workshop. So in a lived environment, I guess is the best way to put it, to become masters of things. Because what we were finding was that in this area anyway, because of people's jobs and school commitments, a lot of the traditional types of activities, of land-based activities, language, traditional arts, were really relegated to weekends or after school. And that was leaving this kind of like, you could see that in the future, there wouldn't be, there'd be less and less people that would carry the knowledge about like traditional harvesting for quill baskets, for example, or the language or whatever. And so there's a conflict between the calendar and the clock and the natural rhythms of the land and the calendar of the earth and the land and the clock of the earth, I guess, the natural clock. So we wanted a space where we weren't living in conflict all the time in that sense. And it allowed people to understand how to do things and to become really good at it from start to finish, so that they could carry the knowledge on to the future generations. That's the whole point of it. And then to return back to the land and understand how to live on the land better, and to live on the land sort of to get reconnected again in that way. So we're heated by wood stoves out there. We have solar power for our power and backup generators, but hopefully that's not used too much. So that's sort of the idea of it. Really, we concentrate a lot on the language. So everything we do is sort of foundational in the language, because we've put an emphasis in it, and we've recognized that as being one of the most important things that we can do. That's not to say other people in the region aren't doing other things that are great and the same types of things, but just that was what we were thinking, is that get back to the land, learn as much as we can, and create a space where young people can come and learn and be immersed in a sense where they become the knowledge carriers of these specialized fields. So instead of being provided a kit to create a quill basket, for example, you know how to harvest the sweetgrass when it's ready, you know how to go harvest the birch when it's ready, you know how to harvest the porcupine, how to take care of it, how to do the quills from roadkill and whatnot, and you know how to do all of those steps, and then you get good at it doing it over and over and over again. Just like hides, your first hide won't be as good as your 10th hide, that kind of thing.
Amazing. And then it's and how many cabins are you wanting to build? I've supported those fundraisings. I love that. But you have, how many camps do you have now?
We have 6 right now, and that'll be it for a while. We're not planning on expanding or anything. That's sufficient. We have enough space for the people who live there, and we have enough space for guests who come. And then our latest studio/language learning space is beautiful, and it's going to be if COVID would just hurry up and end, then we built this place before. We started dreaming of this place and wanting it before COVID, and started building, and then COVID hit, and then now it's done. And it's we don't want it to be empty. We want tons of people and laughter and kids and all sorts of things happening in their community stuff to happen. And that's the goal for it. And the thing about fundraising is it's exhausting when you do Facebook auctions and things like that. But it's also really fulfilling. And you see that there's a lot of support from community coming from all over. And really, we couldn't have done any of what we did without everybody like yourself and the people who have contributed. That really built the place. We had the idea, but we sure didn't have those kinds of funds to do that. So it's been really amazing to see how social media can, when you crowdsource for things, how people really step up and help that to become a reality. So we've crowdsourced for other people too, and we'll continue to do that and to donate to other people's initiatives. I think it's each one, if we each help each other, we'll get stronger.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about social media, for the most part, I really valued hearing when you said that I never really got anything creatively out of social media, which just very true. It kind of just detracts you, but it has such a capacity to support and create up and help. And so, yeah, just really love that a lot. I just want to say thank you, Masicho Kuyanik Aihai, for for just this incredible time that you took to spend with me, spend with us, and for everyone that came out and engaged in the conversation and asked really good questions. And we'll keep the chat too. And Christi has copies. I have a copy. So if anything comes from that, just really thank you. Thank you very much.
And Eskimon, I'm very grateful. And thank you. And thanks everybody who organized it and everyone who tuned in today and this evening or whatever time it is, wherever you are. And I wish you all well. I wish you all good health and much joy and laughter and freedom.
Freedom. You know, I met, we're gonna close up now, but I met Wilfred's children, Greg and Jennifer.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. What a small world. Holy.
Small world. Thunder Bay, because Greg would house actors at his house. And so Jonathan Fisher and all these, like I would do a show in Thunder Bay about every year for about 5 or 6 years. And so he always opened the door for one of the actors. And so then Greg, we would kind of hang out at their house. And I just remember the picture of Wilfred being there, and him and his daughter and his sister would just share stories about their father. So thank you for bringing his picture up and for sharing that knowledge and how alive his memory is with people who really knew and loved him.
Yeah, thank you.
Yay.
Okay, bye everybody.
Bye.